me to what we believe we need. Like, do we actually know what we need? And I think this is going to be the highlight and the energy of this Mercury retrograde. Whereas last Mercury retrograde, it was happening during Pisces season. And during Pisces season in that Mercury retrograde, I talked a lot about the difference between oxytocin and dopamine, and really knowing how you go about getting your needs met. But this is to peel back a layer even more of, do you actually know what your needs are? Because on a subconscious level, we are always pursuing what we need. And that's how you know we always get our needs met. It's just a matter of, do you actually know what you need? And are you choosing a way to get your needs met that actually will align to you? Or is it just validating? Does it just suit the need in terms of obligation, but not necessarily desire? And in my last post, I talked about this a little bit with all the discourse that's happening with that tarot reader who went back to Christianity, because there's been a lot of, I think, discourse around like her clients who got readings from her and felt like, you telling me you've been battling with your faith all this time? Because she said that she had been battling with, what she was doing with tarot and Christianity for about a year. And when I looked at her comments, a lot of people were saying like, well, girl, you just did a reading for me a couple weeks ago. Like, what does that mean? And to an extent, I get what they mean, but also I feel like, well, did the reading resonate? Did it, what did you do with the information of the reading? And if it did resonate, if it was helpful to you, what would it matter that she was battling with her own internal belief system? But I think the issue is, when it comes to relationships and community and just experience as a whole of what we choose to get our needs met through versus resonance, it's always going to feel like some type of chaos when that person who is fulfilling that need says no or changes their mind or creates a boundary. Then I think for the person who is seeking to get their needs met, have like a internal tantrum ultimately of believing that need cannot be met because this person said no, versus taking a step back and reevaluating, what is my part in this? What do I need? And is this need available to be met somewhere else? Or even, is this need that I have, is there a way for it to get met that actually aligns with me? So if I'm taking myself for the example and going back to my regression, I feel like I need connection, but I also need money. And so the ways that I feel like I've gone about getting these needs met has been through, I think with connection, it hasn't been so much external than it has been internal. So this is how I've been able to, I guess, develop what works for me. And like when I talk about devotionals and even the 7-day self-love devotional guide, it has been a product of me leaning into connection versus when it comes to the money end of it, I have not leaned into my needs getting met monetarily, if that makes sense. I have leaned into them getting met through, let me see. I was talking about this in last line, that I have been having this, I guess, inner conflict of of like creating out of need, or I can even say desperation. That like, if I need a bill to be paid or something like that, I feel like I could come up with the money, but I haven't been able to generate a level of abundance from a place of desire because I have not been focusing on desire, if that makes sense. I've been focusing on this need being met, as in I have this need in front of me, such as this bill, and so it's like my psyche knows how to figure out how to get a need met. But if I'm moving away from need and into resonance, which resonance to me is more of a desire, then I'm going to have to rework how I think about money and abundance and overflow. And the same goes for connection. I think when it comes to relationships, I talk about this too, that like over the past year and a half, I have had a total like revamp of my relationships because of no longer wanting to be in relationship out of need or obligation, which ultimately ended, I'll say 90% of my relationships, because I had to shift from that need to desire. And so I think in this Mercury retrograde, it will be highlighting the ways that we can kind of start to do that reprogramming and switch from need to desire. Because if you are trying to get your needs met in a relationship, it's going to be very hard to be considerate. It's going to be very hard to hear that person in terms of what they need emotionally, how to support them, how to see, hold them, and connect with them. It's going to be very hard if you're approaching that relationship from a place of need. Because if you are approaching relationships from a place of need, you're going to need them to fit into a very limited box. Versus if it's from a place of desire and resonance, you would have to be curious about it. You would have to be curious about that person. You would have to lean in to their experience and want to share your experience to even kind of find the resonance, which can only happen if you are moving in the energy of desire. And so I think over the next couple of weeks, our habits, which also was coming up for me a lot last week, our habits and what is our underlying motivation for things is going to be highlighted. Now, of course, if you're not aware of how our motivations really reveal themselves, I think it can be a chaotic time, because most times when we are having conflict or there's an issue or something is being mirrored back to us that we are suppressing, it's easy to be the victim, because usually it's going to, hey Tony, it's going to come in through very unfavorable circumstances. So if you have somebody, a friend that betrays you, and it's easy to put the blame on that friend of like, you betrayed me, you're not truly my friend, and that might bring up like jealousy, envy, all of the things that we experience, I guess, in friendship betrayal. Fine. That person just fulfilled the role of showing you your own internal shit. Because I think in order for us to choose the people that we are in relationship with, there has to be something that is motivating us to do that. Think of all the millions, billions people in the world. What made you choose that person to be your friend? What made you choose that person as your romantic partner? It's not just because they're charming. There's plenty of charming people. There's plenty of good-looking people in the world. What made you choose that person to be in relationship with, to be in community with, to be in business with? And so, like, when you unpack that even further, of like, there is something motivating you to be in that type of dynamic, and that's going to reveal what you needed out of it. even if it is unfavorable, a lot of our needs and our patterns, we're not choosing them because they work for us. When I'm unpacking like my own needs and motivations, it's not because those things work for me. It's because they provide a certain dopamine. They provide a certain comfort, even, or familiarity. But chaos can be comfortable. Even last week, if I'm giving like a more simple example, I have been reading Atomic Habits, and so it really made me like look over all of my habits, my eating habits, my like workout habits, things like that, right? And so one day last week, I did a bunch of shit I didn't want to do, basically. I cleaned out my cat's litter, I paid some bills, and right as I was about to sit down, I'm like, oh, I want a piece of cake. And so because I was able to like catch, why do you want a piece of cake? And it was because after being responsible, I feel like, okay, I need to reward myself, or I need some type of comfort because this made me stressed in some type of way. Now I'm looking for some type of rush of dopamine that will alleviate this feeling of stress. So the need isn't so much something sweet. The need is comfort. The need is relief. And so what else could bring me comfort? What else could bring me a sense of relief? And that's where you would have to look at resonance versus need or obligation or validation. That, like, yes, that piece of cake would feel comforting. It would fulfill the need of needing relief for right now. But later, I'm going to gain a pound or two, and I'm going to regret that I ate this loaf of fucking cake. But in the moment, I'm going to get the relief that I was seeking. And so in having to like reroute your needs to something healthier that actually would align to you, you would actually have to be able to catch it before you fulfill that need. So now, instead of reaching for something sweet or like a quick dopamine hit, what else instead would bring me comfort or relief? Maybe I need to pause and take some deep breaths, or go for a walk, or do something that would give me some type of reward. I'm still trying to figure out because right now I feel like I don't know what to do to replace the cake besides taking a deep breath. There's nothing else that I feel like I know right now that is rewarding. Hey, Elle. But to be aware of like, I'm choosing to eat this cake right now because I want some relief. I have started to say it out loud that like, I'm choosing to eat this piece of cake anyway, even though I don't think it's the healthiest, even though I could be pursuing something different. Saying it out loud helps, because that in itself is like, what am I doing? Let me put it away. It has helped. That like, this has helped my sweet addiction, even though not so much. But hey, Detroit's dollar. I love rewarding myself. Yeah, I think I reward myself in unhealthy ways though. Like even in terms of money, I think sometimes I could get frivolous with my spending of like, oh, I had a bad week, I deserve it. But it's like, you're gonna regret that when you need to have this money for this bill. That like, you just went and spent money you didn't have because you feel like you need to reward yourself. And so now I have been thinking about all of these different ways that I self-sabotage, because food is one of the ways that I know I self-sabotage, because I've been an emotional eater. But I can also see how that shows up in other ways. Like another example, what was it? I think even scrolling, that like I have tried to be more intentional about like my mornings, especially of just leaving my phone in another room. That way, I would have to kind of be inconvenienced to even start scrolling. And so I'm unpacking all of the habits that I have that don't lead to my success or like my overall wellness. But I think that's what will be highlighted in this Mercury retrograde is like, how do you go about getting your needs met? Because we always get our needs met. It's just a matter of, are you aware of the ways your psyche and your subconscious gets your needs met? Because the subconscious is what is controlling your actions 90% of the time. They say we're only fully conscious of our actions 10% of the time. So if you're only conscious 10% of the time, one, you're going to have to really use that 10% to be working overtime if you're not doing subconscious reprogramming. But I'm definitely addicted to my phone. My screen time is absurd. I find that if I can replace scrolling with something else that I enjoy, coloring has been really good. Getting out with the ladies this weekend was really good. Like, I don't think I was on my phone hardly any this weekend. Hey, Jillian, did you make it home safely? Yeah, like, I don't think I was really on my phone hardly at all this weekend. I feel like with sweets in particular, I do believe that we tend to cling to sweets when we are missing out on like the sweetness of life. I love that we always get our needs met. It's just how healthy or unhealthy. Right. It really comes down to that. It's like, and if you start to really look at all the things that's unhealthy in your life, of like, I am choosing the unhealthy version of this. Out eating now, flight not till 8. Oh, okay. I thought you were leaving this morning. When you start to think about that, it's like, oh, I'm choosing this experience. So it's really never out of our control. And I hate to sometimes say that, because if you are literally a victim of violence or something like that, you can take that out of context and say like, well, I didn't choose this experience, right? Yes, we can say that, but on a grander scale, when we think of the nervous system we inherited, the patterns we inherited, the ancestral shit that we've inherited, a lot of that did choose you being in this type of circumstance. I'm about to trigger warning. I'm about to talk about something that could be very triggering if you have experienced this. But this is always the example I like to give. If you have experienced any type of sexual assault or molestation, no, you are not choosing that experience. Who would choose that, right? But I do think you can be born into a frequency, a family, a environment where now you have the cloak of neglect and unprotection that would make you more available to a predator. And because you have the patterns of someone who is unprotected, you will be in that environment. Even down to choosing a particular partner. I was 17 when I had my first child. I got into that predicament because that is a family pattern. There are not many people in my family that have not had children before 20. It's actually very rare, except for like the new like it kind of ended with me. The new generation like our kids, like my siblings and our kids have not had kids in their teens. Personally, I think like teen pregnancy is at a all-time low. I think women now are just choosing not to have kids, but especially teens, that one, I think we're more proactive parents that would make it difficult to have teen pregnancy. But because I think my teen pregnancy was really a product of being unsupervised, not having parenting. And I see somebody talk about this of like when you become a parentified child, you start doing adult like shit early because you're like, well, I'm grown, which I can resonate with. When I think about the freedom I had at 16, 17, absolutely absurd. Like, if I'm not gonna go into it, but when I think about it, it's like, yeah, of course I would have been in that type of situation. Who wouldn't under those circumstances? And even in terms of environment, most of my friends too also had either been pregnant and got an abortion or had a child before 20 as well. So when I talk about like, in a lot of ways, our patterns choose for us, and we are born into our patterning, unfortunately, because we inherit our nervous system, which sets up our patterns for us, which a part of my name, Sacred Kismet, is about no longer being attached to your fate and moving into your destiny, because fate and destiny are two separate things, even though a lot of times they're used interchangeably. Fate is what we're born into. It's the family system, it's the society, it's the community, it's the norms that we have been programmed to believe, right? But then at a certain point, we get the wherewithal, the awareness, the freedom to choose to go back to remember, what did I actually come here to experience? What did me on a soul level need to embody in this lifetime? And that's our sacred destiny. That's our sacred kismet. Not what we were born into, but most people get stuck in the fate, because to get it to go from fate to destiny is a very difficult thing to do, because most people never do it. We have not seen people really move in purpose. We have seen people adapt to their circumstances, for sure. And even when we talk about adapting to our circumstances, you can be a doctor and that could be a product of you adapting to your circumstances. Say, for instance, your mother died at 9 from cancer, and she battled years because she was going through chemo and the doctors couldn't save her. So that gave you the motivation to become a doctor, even though you were born to be an architect. That it is your pain driving you to this purpose, not a organic resonance with that. And so you may go to school all those years, become a doctor, and hate being a doctor. Bedside manner, terrible. Dread going to work every day, even though you're doing something beautiful. You're saving lives. You're making a great contribution to the world, but it does not resonate with you. This goes back to, you are doing it now out of obligation. You are doing it now because you feel like you need to, because this serves your pain point. This serves your trauma. Never mind what it's not doing for you on a soul level. It doesn't feel fulfilling. It doesn't light you up. It doesn't feel inspiring. It doesn't make you love better. It doesn't make you be more caring and considerate and all of those things. It actually is draining your life force out of you, because you are pushing yourself to that. He said, me as a lawyer. What made you become a lawyer? Yeah, the type of freedom I got would be called neglect and abandonment. Okay, I'm so glad you said that. The type of freedom I got would be called neglect and freedom. Okay, so with my regression yesterday, what came up was me experiencing abundance, but the abundance also came with a loss, right? The loss was a loss of connection. My mother was no longer present in my life, and so this opened up abundance. Yes, my dad had more money. He was more like willing to give the money, so it did put me in a position to receive more financially, but I lost a lot emotionally. I lost a lot of structure. Lost a lot of comfort. And yes, I did gain a lot of freedom, but the freedom was really just abandonment and neglect. I had a lot of freedom to do whatever the hell I wanted to do because I was unsupervised. And what that has created for me was to almost resent freedom. And so, what did that look like for me in resenting freedom? Is now creating a life where I don't have much freedom. So now I'm a mother of 4 in a long-term relationship. I'm in an enmeshed family that I can't be an individual in. I'm stuck in this box of serving everybody's needs. And so now I have rejected freedom. And even though I'm pointing the finger of like, you're not giving me freedom, you're not seeing me, I can't be this here, I chose this because it served my pain point. And now that I'm in this position where I'm reevaluating what it means to choose a life of desire and pleasure and resonance. What resonates with me is not that, honestly. Like, I even had a conversation with, and not that I don't want to be a mother, I don't want to only be a mother. I have to have my individuality. And that has also made me have a lot of conflict in relationships because relationships are a double-edged sword for me in a lot of ways. They bring a great deal of comfort, and I can hide in relationships, which has been my patterning. But then I resent it because then I don't have the freedom that I naturally desire. And that, I don't know where I went with that. But I'm finding now that in order for me to feel connection in relationships, I have to be my most authentic self, so that you are choosing that version of me, not the version of me that feels like I need this relationship to hide, or I need this relationship for comfort, I need this relationship for familiarity. I need to be in relationships that choose me in my highest form. That way they respect the individuality. The pendulum swings because we seek balance if you work to heal and grow. Yeah, I think at this point in my life and I guess journey, I no longer really seek balance. I seek harmony because we're never really going to get balance, to be quite honest. When we are in relationships, when we are in communities and families and all of this, you're never going to go 50-50. It's just never going to work that way, which is why I don't really talk about men and women dynamics, because everybody has to show up in their full capacity. Let's say that. In a relationship. Today I might got 20. I'm running low today. I've had a long week. I had a busy weekend. I might be at 20% today. My partner might be at 50. Okay? Since I got 20, you got 50. You got dinner tonight. Harmony. It ain't gonna be balanced. Okay? You're starting this business, you need to take some of your funds to pour into you starting this business. I'm over here with a surplus of money or some overflow. I can pick up the slack here. I know what we're working for. And this is where partnership has to come in. This isn't this it it's no longer about romance. It's about love, and what love truly is partnership. If you love somebody, you want the best for them. You think highly of them. You are thinking about what would serve their soul, not just what would serve you in your need. This is why you can't go into relationships from a place of need. You can't go into a relationship where I need you to be this for me. I need you to validate this for me, because that person is always going to come up short, because in order for them to meet your need, they're going to have to self-abandon in order to meet that need, because now you have put them into this box. And that's too much for anybody to live up to, even in motherhood. I had to have this conversation with my daughter that I'm not gonna be able to meet all her needs. Sorry, I'm not. You're gonna have some needs that you might have to get out the mud. You're gonna have some needs that you're gonna have to get from your father, because I'm only one person. My capacity is only what it is. Some days it may be at 100. Some days it may be at 80. Today it might be at 20. So you may not be able to get all of your needs met. Now, of course, the basic needs of like care, consideration, respect, food, shelter, yes. But we in particular were having a conversation about grace and addressing certain things. I'm not always going to be able to meet you in the grace you think you deserve or you feel entitled to. I'm not always going to be able to deliver what I'm saying in a pleasant way, because I'm not always pleasant. That I'm a woman, a human being who fluctuates, who some days I might be chipper and happy and in a good mood, and to where I can have a little more patience. Today, I got 20% and you on my nerves. Yeah, I might be a little snappy. But this is the dynamic of relationships that we even have to teach our children, that there has to be harmony here. And there has to be a respect for the core of a person beyond what they are here to do and serve for you. And I do think that that has to be taught in childhood, to be able to consider a person. Because I think a lot of the relationship dynamics and why it's in shambles the way it is because we have lost the plot on love. That love requires consideration. That love requires you to be inconvenienced sometimes. That's a part of the agreement of love. But I think to love a person, you have to have the desire to want to be in that relationship. It can't feel like an obligation. It can't feel like you need me to be this thing. I also have to come with it with a desire, with a curiosity to be able to lean in even when it's uncomfortable. Because love will ask that of you, that even through your discomfort, will you still be here? Will you return through an argument? Will you just disregard it, dismiss it? Will you return to thinking the best of me even when I don't live up to the standards that you set to me? That has to be the agreement both ways. That like, are you choosing people to be in relationship with that are choosing the relationship from a place of desire versus they need you to serve something for them, and the same for you. And so when we look at how friendships fall apart, I hate to say it like this, but I do love when something falls apart because I get to examine how did that at one point serve me, because at one point it did. Even because I know we like to nitpick of like all the ways people have betrayed us and did us wrong and they were a terrible person once we break up. Okay, while you were in that relationship, they were still that person. So the only thing that changed is now it's no longer serving you. So it does us a disservice to only place the blame on that person when they were actually showing us a very real image of our blind spots. They were showing us a very real image of the things that we suppress. And that's why we have the reaction that we have, because perhaps they awakened something within you. And once you are now able to like come back into your body and look around and like, oh, you ain't shit, let me get up out of here. Now you see all the red flags. Now you see how much of a terrible person they are. But they weren't that before, because you had blinders on, because you needed that relationship to serve you in some type of way. And so this is how you can let go from a place of peace and acceptance of, oh, I chose that experience to bring me closer home to myself. I chose that experience because it was teaching me about my own love that I was suppressing. It was teaching me about an aspect of myself. Like when I think about the relationships that I've lost over the last year and a half, those people have taught me a great deal about who I am. Excuse me. They have taught me a great deal of who I am. And I think I was only able to release the relationships because I came back into that remembering I don't need you to show me this suppressed version of me anymore. I got it. Cool. Our time together has just run its course. That there is really no bad blood, really. Because even in the reverse, that you taught them something as well. I look at old relationships like that and what I can learn from them. I play a part in it too. Yeah, I think we do ourselves such a disservice to dismiss somebody as just harmful, that we miss out on how they could actually be helpful to us. Which I know is a very hard thing to do when you have experienced violence or harm from the person. But I don't believe we get into relationships with people that we are not an energetic match to. Oil and water can't mix. I always also give the analogy like a drug addict more than likely is not going to choose to be in relationship with somebody who does not do drugs or who does not have a drug addict mindset. Like to be in a relationship with a drug addict, you have to be also severely codependent. So like most people who are in relationship with people who have some type of addiction also have an addiction. They just are not probably as overt in their addiction. Their addiction is more covert. And I find this to be intriguing, especially when have looked at love addiction in particular, because love addiction is a very covert addiction, similar to like sugar in a way. That like love addiction, it's easy to be the victim, and so like you never get to see your addiction for real, because you're choosing people who are emotionally unavailable most times. You're choosing people who do not know how to love, because also you don't know how to love. And so you guys match in that way, similar to like a narcissist empath dynamic. Typically the empath is the victim in the situation, even though the empath also chose the narcissist for a very specific reason. There was a need for the narcissist. That's why they chose them. They're like, this narcissist didn't just land in your life and they were so charming that you just bypassed all the red flags. No, that doesn't happen. It also seen somebody say this, that like an abusive parent can't abuse children without a passive parent. And most times that the focus is on the abusive parent, but once you start to heal, you then redirect your focus on the passive parent of like, but you allowed this nigga to do this, and like you never left, you just kept us in harm's way. I think about that when I watched the Michael Jackson movie, that like his mom was the passive parent. That like, yes, Joe Jackson gets all the slack of how he treated them and abused them. The mother doesn't get the same recourse of you allowed, you never left. You allowed him to abuse your children. So in that way, in a lot of ways, I think you are equally as abusive. My mom would literally go to a different part of the house. Yeah. And I think for mothers in particular, like if the father is abusive and the mother is the passive one, I think it's because they too are still in a childlike state. Like they're still in daughterhood. If y'all haven't read my Substack about generations of daughters, I talk about how there's a lot of women, I don't want to say most, but most women have not moved into womanhood, that we have been stuck in this perpetual state of daughterhood. And if you are stuck in this perpetual state of daughterhood, your husband is not your husband. Your husband is your father, because you're looking to him to be your authority. And I would bet my dollar it's because of also your religious beliefs, that religion also teaches you to stay in a perpetual state of daughterhood as well. Which I don't even know if y'all would know what I'm talking about. The tarot reader who went back to Christianity. Are y'all in the know of all of that? There's a lot of discourse here on TikTok about it, but how do we know when we step into adulthood? I think when we start to take responsibility for ourselves. That like when we start to take responsibility of our needs, and not just, oh, okay, I could pay my own rent, my own bills, I feed myself, I clothe myself, I do. No, like, are you taking care of your own needs emotionally? Which, going back to what this live was intentionally for about Mercury retrograde, I think this retrograde is going to highlight how we get our needs met. Are we looking for other things to meet our needs in a way that does not align with us thriving, us feeling aligned with our body, our soul, our heart, our love, are we moving in alignment, or are we choosing to get our needs met through unhealthy circumstances? So like our needs are always getting met. It's just a matter, is this a temporary fix, or is this moving me to alignment? Honestly, I guess I can say I'm almost there. I feel the same. I feel like if I would have been having this conversation a year ago, I would probably even say 6 months ago, not 6 years, 6 months ago, I would probably for sure be like, yeah, I'm a woman. What the hell you mean? But since I have did that inner child regression and have been unpacking this perpetual state of daughterhood, it has been exposing me to all the ways that, I'm expecting someone to meet these needs, or someone to save me from myself in a way. So like even in my unhealthy ways I get my needs met, I can see in a lot of ways how I'm aware, but I haven't taken the responsibility of being responsible for those needs getting met in healthier ways. That's where the reparenting come in, of like, are you now a mother to yourself, that you're no longer looking to your mother to mother you, that like now you can release her of her duty of doing that. Because I do think this is what the whole like going no contact movement is amongst women with their mothers, is that they are having to grow into womanhood, and you cannot do that while also trying to hold your mother to what she should have done for you. That like you're gonna have to take back the reins of like, yes, this should have been done in childhood, but it wasn't. And so now I'm choosing to do this for myself. I'm choosing to teach myself new patterns. And I can think of other ways that I have done this. Like when I moved here to Texas, I just made a decision to be a more cleaner and more organized person, because I can say I was messy before. What made me choose that was, I feel better when my house is clean. I feel good when my house is organized, is tidy. When my house is chaotic, my mind is chaotic, my emotions are chaotic. And so if I am choosing to move into a space where I want peace and I want it to be regulated, and I'm saying I want these things, I have to actually do the things that would help me be in that space. And me having a dirty or unorganized house is not going to help me in that. And so I had to really develop habits that would help me keep my house clean, which was realizing I can't wait till Saturday to clean. They're like, I have to be cleaning every day. Now, personally, that might be a no-brainer for people, but I feel like I was not raised that way. I think a crucial part of like the years where I would have been implementing that, my mother was not in my life. So like there's been years where my mom was in my life, and then years where she was not. And the years that she was not, I think, is where you would develop those like routines to keep a clean house. And that's not shit my dad cared about. Like my dad had a saying like, y'all could do what y'all want in your rooms, as long as the living room and the kitchen is clean, basically. And so like also he was never at home. So like when we knew he was on his way home, we would just hurry up and like, hurry up and clean up. Teenagers, like, this is like what I mean by if you don't have no type of supervision, there's no, like, okay, Saturday by noon, your chores need to be done. A teenager ain't gonna be doing that shit. And so, like, that is one of the habits I had to, like, develop in my adult years of, like, I don't like living like this. This is not serving me. Let me get some habits in place that would help me have a cleaner house. And it has worked. And so, like, now I'm having to, like, think about that and all of the ways. I just think doing regressions help tremendously, because sometimes it's very hard to spot your own patterns. It's very hard to spot your own needs and motivations for things, because our ego and our psyche is not set up in a way that wants to be seen. Like, the ego wants to be covert, because it's a layer of protection. It's like, you gotta think of your ego as being your security system. That it is your ego's driving force is to protect you and to get your needs met. That is the ego's job. And to ensure that I can get my job done, I gotta block out anything that could potentially distract me. And so, in order for you to get to the ego, to really be able to see your ego's programming and its operating system, you have to go to the subconscious. You're not going to be able to do that from a conscious state. I don't care how much therapy you do. I don't care how much journaling prompts you do. Hey, I do pretty. I don't care how much you even look at your relationships and like, oh, this is a problem. It's very hard to pinpoint what your true pattern is and what your motivation is, because your ego is going to want to protect itself. So it's going to make the other person the problem. It's going to say, this isn't our issue. It's going to block out accountability in a lot of ways. And so, and on top of a lot of the things that we think is us, oh, that's just my personality. That's just how I am. That's just what I've always done. It's not even truly you. Those might be just you masking. Even good parts of your personality that you feel like, oh, this is like, when I started doing readings, I would hesitate so hard because everybody believes themselves to be such a good person. And I think innately people do want to be a good person. Like, I will say that. But I also think human beings are naturally selfish. I think human beings are naturally manipulative because we are always trying to get our needs met. And so if you have no awareness of how you are trying to get your needs met, you are naturally going to be manipulative. And so when I first started doing readings, I would be doing readings and have to tell somebody like, oh, you're manipulative. And they were like, huh? I'm like, no, I'm always like, I'm getting taken advantage of, and I feel so unappreciated, and I'm seeing the cards. Personally, I know the cards don't lie. I trust my ability to read energy, and so I would have to unpack and ask certain questions so that they can come to their own aha moment of like, oh my God, I am manipulative. Because in their head, they're just a good person. They're like, oh, I volunteer, I do all these things, I'm you know, the good person trope of like, I'm just so loving. And it's like, well, why? What do you mean why? I'm just a good person. Okay, but what made you give that person $100 and you didn't have no money, then you got to stop and think about it. What was my motivation in it? But it's very hard to do that type of unpacking, I think, when you're in your conscious state. Because I can think of one person in particular that I had to eventually be like, I'm not giving you a reading. Because one, you're not taking anything from these readings and doing anything with them. But also, you are looking for validation. You don't want truth. You don't want resonance. You want to be what you need out of this to be true. And I can't serve you in that. This is a waste of my time and a waste of my intuition that I could be using in a different way. And still to this day, I feel like she ain't did nothing with it. Highly successful, beautiful family, whole nine. Also know deeply unhappy. Going back to what we were talking about before, that like, if the beautiful family, the success, the money, all the things that you have accomplished out of your pain point of maybe you grew up in poverty, maybe you grew up the fat kid, and so now you have a handsome, beautiful husband and beautiful children, and it validates something for you that people have told you you don't deserve, you shouldn't have. Now you got it, and you realize this is not fulfilling. This does not make me feel any better about being the fat kid. It has now just only made me suppress the feelings that was associated with that. And perhaps you could have been doing something totally different. That like, perhaps you don't even like men. That really your wildest dreams and desires will be to be with a woman with no kids, living off the Gulf of France or something. I don't know. But I find that most people, especially who are getting readings, want to know that the choice that they made were right. That's the dream. They want to know that what they chose was right, or what they think is right, and they want validation. They don't really want truth or resonance. It's very rare that you come across people in that sector of, I think, self-help and healing that are really seeking change in a real way. I think the same thing when it comes to therapy. They're like, a lot of people go to therapy, especially now, because for the sake of saying, oh, I've been in therapy, or to process or maybe talk about shit. I don't know that it's really helping people get to the truth of themselves, though, to be honest. And so I think these are topics that should be explored during this Mercury retrograde. And I think whether we go out our way to or not is going to come up. But I do like to think that being intentional about this time, whenever we do whenever we have a retrograde, I also pair it with doing regression work, because our logic and our consciousness is already regressing into our subconscious state, which is why we have the mishaps that we have. So when we think of Mercury retrograde, we think of like the technology glitches and email mishap, the text mishaps, and all of that. I think of that as like the glitches in the Matrix, which, if you're familiar with the movie, whenever there was glitches, it was because it was trying to give a warning of like, this isn't reality. And so whenever Mercury retrograde comes and you experience those type of glitches, I do think it's our subconscious way of alerting us of like, hey, this is what's really going on here. Look into this. Like, I think when it comes to like exes reappearing during Mercury retrograde, is because you still have that pattern that attracted that person, and it is so that you can reevaluate it. Are you now ready to let go of this pattern? Do you need to learn something else about this pattern so that you can be fully aware of it? It's not just for the sake of, oh, this ex is returning to test you. I always like to say, like, I don't think the universe tests us. I don't think God tests us. I don't think we get tests. I think we get assessments of like, this is where we are. This is what we're working with. And I think if you could start to look at shit as not a test, but more so an assessment, because perhaps if you look at how you would have responded to something 2 years ago, it's a lot better, but maybe not where you want to be. Fine, okay? So on this assessment, you got an 80%. The last assessment, you got a 45%. So, you're in alignment with growth. That's fine. I think the same thing when it comes to Mercury retrogrades, but I think you can get a lot done through Mercury retrogrades through working with your subconscious. And so for the duration of Mercury retrogrades, I am making regressions 20% off. So they're originally $222. I think with 20% off, it's like $177 or something like that. But all throughout Mercury retrograde, they'll be discounted. But I just think it's a really good time to do subconscious workings because they stick a lot. I think more, I don't want to say quicker, I say you get straight to it. Like anybody who was in the inner child regression workshop, I think is prepared for whatever comes up in this Mercury retrograde. Just because I do think the retrograde is going to be showing us emotional neglect. Which, when I think about everybody who's in the workshop, pretty much pinpoints to some form of emotional neglect. How long is Mercury retrograde? Mercury retrograde ends July 23rd. And so in that way, I think whoever was in the workshop, it has like a little bit of a edge ahead, which I will say, I talked about this a couple of months ago, but I think my relationship with my subconscious, but also like the Akashic records, I always feel like I'm a little bit ahead of astrological events. I know I had asked, like, does anybody else who does like Akashic record shit, like readings or healing work, also feel that way? But I didn't get that many replies on that video. But I always feel like I am doing work before I need it, if that makes sense. So I think the regression workshop was to prepare for what will come up during this retrograde. How long? I think I answered that. But I'm excited to see what transpires during Mercury retrograde, because I think last retrograde in Pisces was really good. Like, I went back to listen to my live through Pisces season, and it was like, ooh, these gems, and I could see how I've implemented what I was talking about then too. So I do think this will be like an extension of last retrograde. And so if you journal a lot, I would go back and read some of your journal entries during that time too, because that will also kind of give you a heads up of what will require more of your attention. This go around. I also think this is going to be the case for the Mercury retrograde that's happening in October in Scorpio season. So I noticed this year's Mercury retrogrades are all happening in water signs. And so this Mercury retrograde this year in particular is helping us with, I think, emotional maturity, like growing emotionally on a collective level. And this is like, I think, the magic of like when you start to pay attention to how we're influenced about or influenced from the planets in that way, because Mercury is the planet of communication, technology, wisdom, thought patterns. And so I do believe this is how we collectively evolve. That's my theory, that through Mercury retrogrades, it gives us like an upgrade in our thinking. And I think if as a collective, we start to incorporate emotional depth in our communication and in our thinking, that will take us a lot further than where we've been. Because I think that's part of the issue, just with humanity, is that there is a lack of feeling. That people aren't actually in their body enough to feel their emotions, and that causes people to operate from a very disassociated place. And I think when you're disassociated, it's very hard to be considerate. I think it's very hard to care and be in real relationship with not just other people, but even yourself. And that you will be in a state of survival and only looking to get your needs met. I think that's what makes us very selfish in nature, is that we're not fully in our body. That like we are, I think at this point of our awareness, we are very disassociated. Like as a people, as a species. That and that's what makes us kind of lack in the empathy department, I think. So I think that's it. That's all that I really wanted to talk about today. If you would like to book a regression, you could do so on my website. My website is listed in my description box. Otherwise, it's just sacredkismet.com, and it will be under offerings. For the duration of Mercury retrograde, they'll be on discount. They'll be 20% off. And take advantage, because I may be raising the prices after Mercury retrograde. As well as the cohort that I'll be starting tomorrow may eventually turn into like a one-on-one offering, but like an extended version of it, just because I'm really excited, because I just know it's going to be good. And it has given me now a formula of putting my work in a more strategic flow, if that makes sense. That, like, it has given me the steps to know how to hey Tim, help people from start to finish. Because I think with doing readings, it's very kind of easy to highlight where you are in your journey, and I can give pointers and suggestions. I think even with regressions, that the initial regression is going to highlight maybe a self-sabotaging behavior, and that's going to come up and activate or trigger some things that come up. But what this cohort is showing and teaching me is that this will be the formula from start to finish, that as you activate and you trigger yourself and your subconscious into becoming more aware, what to do after that. Because each stage, like week 1 is about receiving, which when you think about self-sabotaging behaviors, there are behaviors that create a layer of protection for the ego. When you take that mask off, you have to be open to now receive, then connect, then express, and then now embody. And so for each week of the cohort, we'll be going through how you identify your patterns within each of those sectors. So the first layer is addressing the ego, and then each week will be addressing how your ego controls or operates within each sector. And when it comes to like receiving, that's receiving love, that's receiving abundance, that's receiving insight and wisdom and guidance. And so when you think about how the ego controls what you receive, it is very sneaky and very covert in the ways that it operates. And so the first week is kind of addressing that. And then week 2 is about connection, as in how you connect to not just people and things, but also yourself. What do you believe about love and connection and unity? And being able to identify your patterns with that ego that showed up, and like reprogramming those patterns. And then week 3 is about being seen. And I find that being seen is not so much of a fear of actually being seen. I think it's a fear of rejection. And we'll work through those patterns of a fear of rejection. And then the last week is about now combining all of those things and embodying them. But I think in week 4, when it comes to embodiment, it's a lot easier. That'll be the easiest week, because everything else has already happened subconsciously. And when you reprogram subconsciously, it naturally becomes a part of your actions. You don't necessarily have to do anything. Similar to our cycle. And so when I talk about cycle syncing, this is also the formula I used in this, because our cycle naturally teaches us how our subconscious patterns go. So in our first week of our period, when we're in our follicular phase, is when we are starting to open up to new energy, so new patterns, which is why I focused on receiving that first week. So now we're open to new ideas. Our neuroplasticity is more flexible. We're more open to new neural pathways opening. Therefore, we can create new patterns in that first week of our period, our follicular period. Then when we go into our ovulation period, which is when we want to connect, we want more oxytocin, we are more willing to be out and about, we're ovulating, so obviously we're open to connection and intimacy. But That week will focus on your patterns of who you choose to be in connection with. Then week 3 is when we have our luteal phase, which our luteal is when we are naturally, is when the, in week 1 and 2 is when we are creating new patterns. Our neuroplasticity is open to receive. And week 3 is where we get what rejects those new those new ideas and patterns we just brought up, which is why I focus on week 3 being about being seen, because it will show us what is rejecting those aspects. And so showing us our rejection patterns, which is also why we are more irritable when we are in our luteal phase, because our mirrors of what is showing us becomes more prevalent. We're more irritable. Our emotions are kind of all over the place. Also, it will show us what we are suppressing. And what we are suppressing will also reject us. So, because externally it is rejecting us because we are meant to embody it. We are meant to express it instead of suppress it. And so in order for us to express it, we need our external world to reject it in a way that allows us to embrace it. And then week 4 is when we get our menstrual cycle. You don't really have to do nothing at that point. What came up in those 3 weeks, whatever patterns you programmed, whatever came up during your luteal phase, we are naturally going to release with our body. And so the same when it comes to our subconscious patterns, that once you do those 3 weeks, those 21 days, which is also why they say it takes 21 days to create a habit. But once you do those 21 days of recreating the pattern naturally takes way in that week of embodiment. And so I will be focusing on that in the cohort. So the cohort will eventually, I think, turn into a one-on-one package, just because I think group regressions are great, but I think we get more into the nitty-gritty during one-on-ones. One, because I'm walking you through each step. So if there is something uncomfortable that comes up in the regression, I'm also walking you through each way, because I do think in regressions, through group regressions, I'm not with you in whatever it is that you're seeing. And so it can get easy to get stuck in an experience, versus if I'm walking you through it one-on-one, I'm also going to walk you past, like, if we need to pause, we need to breathe, we need to do some things to regulate and proceed, we can. Versus in regressions, I don't like to go as deep as we can go, because I don't want it to be too emotionally distressing or stressful. But in terms of really creating real change and transformation, I do think doing this one-on-one would be more beneficial. So if you are interested in still joining the cohort, you can. Today's the last day for real, because it's not on my website anymore. But if you are interested, you can DM me. Otherwise, after July, it will be a one-on-one thing, and it will cost substantially more. So we shall see, and I'll talk about it more and more as I explore, and I'll be talking about my experience as well with it. If you're new here, whenever I do a workshop or I'm doing anything, I'm also doing it side by side in my own personal life too, and I find that it's easier for me in this way, because I understand what you're going through in real time, and this is how I feel like I keep my commitment to the work because I keep my commitment to my work, if that makes sense. That like, yes, I'm helping others through their shit, but it helps me stay accountable in a way to deepening into myself. And I enjoy that. So anywho, I'm go on now. I shall be back Thursday.